we're going to go back to form the sentence. And when we form the sentence, what we're going to do is always start from the beginning of the organizer. You need to teach kids writing is all about rereading, rereading, rereading. They tend to just stick with a sentence, a new sentence, and they don't tend to make their writing cohesive and coherent, which will happen when you don't reread. So let's go back and reread. Ready? The frightened boy screamed at the long snake he saw in the grass. Now I point to the picture here. I'm not coming up with the sentence. They need to. If I come up with it, they're never going to learn how to do this. So I'll point to the box, and many times they'll just look straight back at me. So your prompt would be, who's doing the action? The snake. All right. What's the snake doing? The snake hissed and rattled his tail. Okay. Let's now say the whole thing. The snake hissed and rattled his tail. That sounds pretty good. Let's go to step 3. Should we add a transition? Let's put a transition line. What are transitions? Special words that move you from one action to the next action. What are transitions? Special words that move you from one action to the next action. Stories, the transitions I record here because this is where the beginning of the next sentence would be, so it's a wonderful place to put it. And transitions that I usually use are going to be time words, location words, sound effects, or how. Those are really good transitions that you can use. And in the back of our book, you'll notice that we have a whole section of charts that you can refer to, and we have some transition charts that you could use and show to the children for them to come up with ideas. How did the snake hiss and rattle his tail? Let's see. Did he do it slowly or suddenly? Let's go back and write suddenly. So now we write suddenly. Now as the year goes on, so those are our different types of transitions. We're going to go back and we're going to add a transition in our sentence. The frightened boy screamed at the long snake he saw in the grass. We said the snake hissed and rattled his tail. Before I go on, wait a minute, I already said snake in this sentence. Woo, 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 redundant police, redundant police. I don't want to keep saying snake, snake, snake. What's another word that I could use for snake? Scary reptile. Reptile. Let's do that, okay? We have the reptile hissed and rattled his tail. Ooh, that sounds good. For our transition, let's see. I could use a how did he hiss and rattle his tail? Did he do it slowly or suddenly? Ooh, we could use suddenly. Maybe I could start with a sound effect. Hiss. I could use a when phrase like after a while, or while the boy was screaming. Or I could use, and I don't want to use screaming, wait a minute, woo, 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 while the boy was yelling. I could use a where. Deep in the tall grass, the snake started to hiss and rattle his tail. So we had a when, a where, we had a how. So I give the kids many different choices, and maybe this time they decide they want to use suddenly. As the year goes on, you may want to give several choices, refer to charts to see different choices, and then the kids write in the one they like best. We'll start having differences in their organizer. Suddenly, the reptile started to hiss and rattle his tail. All right, let's go back now that we've said the sentence, and we will add our capital and a comma after the transition, and a period. Do we want to add fancy words? I could do it before or after I do the punctuation. It really doesn't matter. Let's see. Let's go back and add some fancy words. What in this story sentence right here, what in this action sentence is the most important part? The serpent. So now we could put our little X on the serpent, and we could say suddenly, and how do we want to describe the serpent? What he looks like, or how he feels, or what his personality is like. Maybe we want to describe how he feels since he's hissing and shaking his tail. So suddenly, the angry serpent hissed and rattled his tail. Now we have our sentence, we have our action. What do we do next? We need to continue on. Is our story over? No. So what do we need to do? Repeat these actions, actions, actions. That's why they're actions, actions, actions. We're going to keep repeating these 3 steps until we think our story's done. So now we're going to draw an action line. Now we're going to say, what happened next while the angry snake hissed and rattled his tail? So who's going to do an action next? Is it going to be the boy or is it going to be the snake? Oh, let's have it be the boy. What would the boy do if the snake hissed and rattled his tail? Many times children will say things like, oh, he'll scream again, he'll be scared. Well, instead of just saying the boy was scared, let's help the children come up with, instead of just telling, let's have them show how the boy was scared. So I'm going to say to the kids, well, what would his body do if he was scared? Oh, he would jump. Okay, what would his arms do? They would wave in the air. What would his heart do? What would his heart do? Pound. So let's draw the boy with that scared face. His arms are waving in the air. He's jumping up and down. And his heart is pounding. So we'll use some of those ideas when we come up with this sentence. So let's go back. The frightened boy screamed when he saw the long snake in the grass. Suddenly, the angry serpent hissed, then rattled his tail. Who am I talking about here? Who's doing the action in this new action box? The boy. What could I say? I could say the boy, or I could say he. So these sentences could have your common nouns, pronouns, proper nouns, or synonyms to replace the subject. Instead of boy, maybe we could just say he. He started to jump up and down, and his heart was pounding, and his hands were waving in the air. Let's put all that together. He started to jump up and down and wave his hands when the snake made those sounds. Oh, we don't need to say the heart then. He started to jump up and down and wave his hands when the snake made all those sounds. That sounds great. So now we have it. So should we add our transition? Let's put our transition line. This time I'm choosing not to have a transition. When you have a transition in every sentence, it sounds stilted. So maybe we'll just start with the word he. So we'll go over here and write he to remind ourselves that we're doing that. And then we'll say, he jumped up and down and waved his arms when he heard those scary sounds. Now let's add our capital and our period. And I don't need a comma because I don't have a transition. Now let's go back and read our whole story so far. The frightened boy screamed when he saw the long snake in the tall grass. Suddenly, the angry snake hissed, then rattled his tail. He started to jump up and down and wave his arms when he heard those scary sounds. We have our action in our story here, but is our story done yet? Nope. So we're going to repeat these action box again. So let's go back and let's draw a new action box and let's go. What happened next after the boy heard those scary sounds? He ran home. Okay, let's have the boy run home. Here he is, and there's his house, and he's going to run home. We drew the picture. Now let's come up with a sentence. The frightened boy saw a long snake in the grass. Suddenly, the angry snake hissed and then rattled his tail. He started to jump up and down and wave his arms when he heard that snake sound. So what happened next after he waved his arms and jumped up and down? Who's going to do the action? Let's have the boy do the action. What's he going to do? We have him running home. So now let's make our sentence. The frightened boy screamed when he saw a long snake in the grass. Suddenly, the angry snake hissed and then rattled his tail. He waved his arms and jumped up and down when he heard that snake's sounds. Now what? Who's doing the action in the sentence? So I just point to it. The boy. What did the boy do? He ran home. Okay, how did he run home? Ooh, he ran home really quickly. What is really fast in this world? He ran home as fast as, let's say lightning. Ooh, that's a good one. The boy ran home as fast as lightning. Ooh, that sounds good. Shall we add a transition? Let's see. Ooh, maybe we could add quickly. Quickly, the boy ran home as fast as lightning. Now let's go back and add our punctuation. We're going to capitalize our Q, put our comma, and put our period. When you're doing this activity and you have filled up the front of your page, what's nice about this type of organizer is you can just turn it over and keep having more and more actions on the other side. I think our story's done though. And do you notice we're just planning in this stage 2 activity, we're just planning what happened next, what happened next. It's really important that with primary grade students that they just plan what happened next. So often we try to have them plan out these full-blown stories and look at it as beginning, middle, and end, and that just adds another sequencing technique. Children really need to just look at a story as what happened next at this early stage in their writing, because they're only sequencing. As we get up in the higher level stages, they're going to look at beginning, middle, end, and they're going to have even more that they're going to look at when it comes to sequencing. This keeps the sequencing very simple. All they're looking at is what happened next, and they're only planning that action. It really helps them when it comes to planning a story. We have the whole story. We said, well, we think this story is done. We don't need to go any further. So we're now at the last part of our story, and what is that? Let's see, we have story opening, did it? We finished our actions, actions, actions. Now what do we have? The story is done. At the bottom of our box, we're going to ask, when the story is done, what did the character feel, learn, or wish in the end? So later, once he was back at home, what would he wish? Maybe he wished that he didn't walk in the grass, only played on the swings that night. Maybe he learned that snakes are dangerous animals. Or maybe he felt something. Maybe he felt lucky that he had a safe place to go when he was frightened. At the end of the story, the students need to fill in the story is done box. So they have to decide, all right, this is our main character, is the boy. At the end of the story, to make it a story closing, the story is done, we have to now go back and look at what happened to the boy, and we have to share, what did he think, what did he feel, or what did he wish? Now we'll go ahead and we'll look at, well, maybe he felt lucky because he had a safe home to run to. Maybe he learned, don't walk in tall grass at the park. Or maybe he wished that the snake would find somewhere else to live. So now we go back and we come up with different ideas, and maybe the student said, oh, I think he feels lucky that he had a safe place to go. Let's go ahead and add our punctuation and our capitalization in the end with a comma after the transition, and we have our period. Now let's go back and read the whole thing. So students are going to go back and reread. This is not a memorization activity. You're not trying to say this the same exact way. Notice every time I go back and read it, I may say it a little differently. That's a great way to show children how to revise as they keep rereading, because you're planning and talking, planning and talking.